This is not the first time that I have done a 21-day water fast. In June of 2019, unfortunately, I was diagnosed with a very rare breast disease called Idiopathic Granuloma Mastitis. I will not bore you with all the details, but you can look it up. Through lots of stays in the hospital, steroids, narcotics, probably one of the most painful things that I ever had to deal with. I was at the point where I was getting ready to have chemo and a mastectomy to remove my breast. And I just felt like I needed to do a fast. I had fasted before. My longest time had been 14 days, but never really for a health reason. So I decided to do this 21-day water fast. I took myself off of all medications. I was seeing a doctor about every 3 to 5 days, but as usual, they never ask you what you're eating. So I never told them, and they never really found out. After 21 days, I went back to my doctor, and my largest mass that was 6 centimeters had shrunk down to less than 1 centimeter. So I am going to give you guys a little bit more information just about my backstory and my health journey thus far. So in January of 2019, I felt a small lump in my breast. I contacted my doctor and they sent me in to have a mastectomy. We have breast cancer on both sides of our family. So when I went in for a mammogram and ultrasound, they told me that everything looked fine. They thought it was just a cyst and that it would go away. Literally exactly 6 months later, I was in the shower and I had already lost 130 pounds. So I had saggy like mom boobs. I lifted up my boob to wash it and I felt this huge thing that felt like 2 bars of soap about that big. I freaked out and I ran downstairs, showed my husband, and I was like, something is going on. And it started in my armpit and was going all the way down to the center of my breast. I called my doctor and he sent me in for another mammogram and ultrasound. I'm not going to be able to fit everything in this video, so make sure that you like this video and follow us for part 2. Part 2. So I went in January. They said everything looked fine. I go back in June and it was literally the same people there. So they start doing the mammogram. The lady stops speaking mid-sentence, doesn't speak again. She takes me in for the ultrasound, and this time there's like tons of people in the room. Last time it was only one person. They were pointing, taking pictures, not saying anything. They go talk to the doctor and I hear the doctor say, run all the tests again. And I'm like, that's really strange. So they start doing everything again. Everybody's super quiet, still pointing, looking at each other. And then they had me get dressed, go sit down with the doctor. And the doctor asked me if I have children. I say, yes. He says, do you have anyone to take care of your kids? And I'm like, yeah, like why? And he's like, well, we think that we've caught it soon enough that we will be able to save your life, but it looks like you have breast cancer. I, of course, freaked out because just 6 months ago, you guys said everything looked fine and you let me go home. So I didn't really understand. And it was just a lot to process all in that moment. So I'm not going to be able to finish. So after that, over the next few days, I had to have lots of biopsies done. They were running lots of tests. And I decided to, at that time, do a fast. I'm like, I'm going to be fasting until I get the phone call. We're literally, waiting. They told us prepare. It might take like 2 weeks for them to get back to us because when it's this serious, they run series of tests and all these different things. So I was like, all right, I can fast for 2 weeks. I had done that before. We ended up getting a call much sooner than that. The doctor said, so we ran all the tests, but we're not finding any cancer. We don't know what's going on, but you don't have cancer. So, which we were excited about. And so he was like, we'll see you back in 6 months. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like we were celebrating, we were happy about that. So I thought that initially I was not experiencing pain, which was why everybody was really concerned. After my biopsy, I did start to experience pain in my right breast. My right breast was the only breast that has been affected. And I got this little, it looked like a mosquito bite on my breast. I'm not gonna be So I get this little bump on my breast. I was like on a work trip. It looked like a mosquito bite on my breast. I told my husband, I think I got bit by a mosquito. I was in Alabama, so I was like, it might be a big mosquito. This might be serious. Within 48 hours, this little teeny pinprick of a mark on the outside of my breast turned into something like the size of a 50-cent piece, and I was getting these really sharp pains that would literally stop me mid-sentence. I get home, I go right to my doctor. They give me an antibiotic, and they're like, okay, we don't know what it is, but it was hot to the touch. I wasn't running a fever. They were like, if it's an infection or whatever, an antibiotic should clear it up in a couple of days. And I was like, all right. Still feeling like I'm getting ready to die. Literally, I was in so much pain. I think they gave me some narcotics then. But over the next few days, it just continued to get worse. So my doctor called to check on me, and I told him hey, it's not getting any better. It's actually getting worse. The skin on my breast was getting really tight, and this thing was just getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, it literally looks like my breast is going to explode. So he gave me a referral to a breast cancer specialist that we have here in Maryland, and I made an appointment to go see her. The night before my My son runs up to hug me, like as he's getting ready for bed, and he ran right into my breast. It hurt really, really bad. And that next morning when I woke up, I had blood all over my shirt. My breast had basically exploded. It was pretty gnarly. So I had an appointment like the next day with the doctor. They wanted me to go to the hospital, and I was just like, I did not want to. I bandaged myself up and just kind of like went about my day because I did not want to go to the hospital. I hate being in hospital. So I'm like, this really hurts. It's bleeding, but nobody really knows what's going on at this point. So, I'll just wait until I see you tomorrow. And so I go see her the next day, and she diagnoses me with something called idiopathic granuloma mastitis. So idiopathic because they don't know where it comes from. Granulomas, granulomas, they're basically clusters of cells that form together. So idiopathic granuloma mastitis, idiopathic because they have no idea where it comes from. It's basically an idiot. Granulomatis, they're basically, granulomas are clusters of cells, not necessarily bad, but form together to actually protect your body from something. The only thing here is, in my case, they have never been able to figure it out. Everything else looks clear. I have no infection, no bacteria, nothing. Mastitis because it is a mastitis. It's basically how I remember how to spell the word. So that's what they diagnosed me with. I had never heard of it. I started researching it, and it is really this crazy, super rare disease. Not very many women in the US have it. I'm like the 4th woman in my state to have it, and I'm the worst case that they've seen. These large, hard masses grow in your breast until they can't grow anymore, and then they literally start ripping your flesh. When they make a hole in your flesh, they just like ooze this black jelly looking stuff, and they make these holes where you can literally stick your finger down into your breast. So I ended up having like 6 of these all over my breast. I had to wear special bandages and bras for the better part of a year because I had all of these open wounds. And the way breast tissue is, it doesn't just heal like another cut or scrape would. These are like deep. So I could literally stick my entire finger down into different points of my breast. And so it has to heal back from within first. So some women go and they actually have to get the wounds packed. I did not want to do that. It's very painful, and it's gross, and I don't like it. So I had to buy all my own bandages and all this stuff, and literally change my bandages like multiple times a day because sometimes there would be blood usually when they would first start ripping open, but then you have like this stuff just oozing from you. That's not bacteria, and it's not an infection. The most common thing that they can find between women that have this is that they breastfed within the last 3 to 7 years, but at least half of the women have never even breastfed before. It's most common in Asian and Hispanic women, which I'm neither of those things. And a lot of women have seen great improvement with this breast disease by switching to an anti-inflammatory diet, which keto is, and by losing weight, which I had already lost 130 more pounds. At the time, I maybe could have lost another 10 pounds, but my head would have looked like really big and like alien-like. So it was really interesting to find that. Another thing was they never ever asked me about my diet. I pretty much removed dairy just as a precaution because it still can cause some inflammation, even though it is allowed on a keto-friendly diet and all of those things. But I was in the hospital multiple times with my skin, my breast just literally ripping open, and it was extremely painful. And breast tissue doesn't really take well to narcotics or pain medicine. It's just a different type of beast. Nobody in the hospital even knew what to do because they had never seen it before. So there would just be different like medical students coming in and out to watch what was happening. I had 4 different teams of doctors at the 4 big major hospitals here in the state of Maryland because they were just so fascinated at what was. After rounds of steroids, all of these different medications, I saw infectious disease doctors. I saw doctors to check for autoimmune disease. So many different doctors. There was doctor's appointments like literally 5 or 6 times a week. It was crazy, and still nobody has ever really been able to figure out where this has come from. They just keep saying it's not an infection, it's not a bacteria, but we don't know why your body is doing this and doing it at such an extremely fast rate. So it was really frustrating because nobody really had answers for me, and I just didn't know what else to do. Multiple like biopsies, them trying to figure stuff out, and then finally I just got fed up with it. They finally decided to remove my breast. Because of the way this breast disease is, it actually looks like breast cancer, acts like breast cancer, and is treated like breast cancer. I tried to avoid all of those things for as long as possible, but we were finally at the point now where they were recommending they had now started to recommend a round of chemotherapy and to have a mastectomy and to have my breast removed, which I was actually really relieved because this entire time I literally had been begging for them to just cut my breast off, and everyone was refusing because they were like, you're too young, like let's figure out what this is, calm down, that's a major surgery. And I'm like, you do not understand. I could not lift my right arm for the better part of a year. I couldn't reach without literally feeling my flesh being torn open. I couldn't hug my kids, I couldn't hug my husband. It was just like, it was a lot. And nobody was willing to offer me any answers. They didn't have them. There really wasn't any relief. So when they finally came to me and said, okay, this is what we were prepared to do, I was excited, because I was getting these masses and they were rupturing within like 6 weeks time. And it was a lot. So I'm like, okay, the holidays were coming up. I didn't want to ruin the holidays. So I was like, all right, I'll just continue on with the pain that I'm having. I was like at a level 10 pain. I was on narcotics for probably the better part of 7 months. Like my husband was driving me around everywhere. And even their narcotics, they would just take the edge off. They would put the pain at about an 8, but still anytime I moved my arm, I was in extreme pain. It also caused like joint pain. Like my entire body would just hurt. I would just randomly get sick, start throwing up like all over myself uncontrollably. It was horrible. It was really horrible. Not to mention everything that steroids did, which was just one heck of a ride. But they started talking about surgery and I felt like, okay, this is what I've wanted this entire time. But I just didn't feel right about moving forward with it right away. So I decided that I was going to fast, and I am a Christian. So I really felt like when I was praying that God was calling me to fast for 21 days. The longest time I'd ever fasted prior to that was about 14 days. And at that point, I'd basically tried everything. So I was like, you know what? I might as well give this a try. So this was the first time that I was really going to be fasting for my health. And so I started my fast, like, I want to say the 3rd or 4th of January. I can't remember what day it was, but the fast ended up ending on like Christmas Eve of 2019. And so I fasted for 21 days. I made it. It was extremely hard. I actually got a phone call in the beginning of my fasting. Like they wanted to move my surgery up and do it sooner. And I was like, no, I don't have peace about doing it yet. Even though this was what I was begging God for, I did not feel peace about doing it yet. So I continued to fast and be obedient to what I felt like the Lord was telling me to do. And that was to fast. Now, during my fast, I felt like for the first time, my pain went away, like drastically went away. Now, I did not tell my doctors what I was doing prior to doing it. However, I was on so many medications and they kept telling me that they didn't know what else to do. So I figured, you know what, if they don't know what they're doing, they don't even know why they're doing these things, they're just trying all these things. And it doesn't hurt for me to try something that I want to try. My body, my choice. So I took myself off of all of my medications and decided to do my fast. Now, during the entire process of my disease, I would see a doctor about every 3 to 5 days. So I was seeing doctors every 3 to 5 days during my fast. Not once did they ever ask me what I was eating or if I was eating. Not once did they ever, any of my tests or anything, show alarm to the fact that I was not eating. So I never told them, but I was seeing a doctor. So if I was going to die, every 3 to 5 days, someone would be there to check up on me and make sure that I didn't die. At the end of my fast, I went back to go see them in January. And at the time, before I started fasting, I had a mass that was 6 centimeters that we were expecting to. So we were expecting the mass to rupture because every other mass that I had ruptured. This was the only time that I ever had a mass that did not rupture. So I go back to see my doctors, my team at Johns Hopkins, and my doctor says to me, what did you do? The mass that was 6 centimeters had gone from 6 centimeters down to less than 1 centimeter, if that, she said. And so I told her, I said, I've been fasting. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, I haven't eaten for 21 days. And she was like, no food? I was like, no food. I only drink water. She was like, seriously? And I was like, yeah, seriously. She's like, this whole time you haven't been eating? I'm like, nope, haven't been eating. And she's like, I read something about that with a dog once. And I was like, oh, really? You did? We both kind of sat there and looked at each other for a while. So none of the medicines worked. None of the little procedures that they tried worked. Nothing worked. I fasted, and it was the first time that I had a mass that did not rupture. And for the first time, my pain was decreasing. So at this point, So at this point, they decided to push off the mastectomy. I didn't have to have chemo. They wanted to wait and see what was going to happen, if it would continue to decrease. And of course, at this point, I was back eating again. I wasn't still doing my long fast, and it continued to decrease. So we met and talked, and they said that it would be a good idea for me to have a breast reduction surgery, where they basically would go in and remove all of the diseased tissue and scar tissue, so that if the disease started to flare back up again, that the diseased cells wouldn't be there to have the good cells copy off of, or something like that. I'm not a doctor, but this is how I remember it. So I was like, all right, cool. Only thing was, my insurance company was refusing to pay for it because they wanted to pay for a mastectomy, and if I wasn't doing that, they said they weren't paying for it. So they're like, you're gonna have to pay for it out of pocket. And I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna pray about it. And within 3 days, we got a phone call from the surgeon saying, hey, your insurance company's decided to pay for it. So I was like, okay, God, I see you. Which was really cool, because God had just been answering so many prayers. And I know you're probably thinking, but I thought you just said you had a painful breast disease that put you in the hospital multiple times, was tearing open your flesh, and you were on narcotics for almost 7 months and they didn't even work. What do you mean? When I first had my testing done, I had a BIRADS level 5, which is like 97 or 98% chance that it's cancer. I firmly believe that I had breast cancer in my body. It runs on both sides of our family. But so many people we had praying for us. I do believe that God stepped in and that I was healed. Still having to have that perspective of, yes, this disease that I have sucks, but it's not breast cancer. And the disease is not terminal. Unless you get an infection inside one of those wounds, you're not likely to die from it. So I still had to look at it as, okay, this was supposed to be something else, and it's not that. So just seeing God show up in so many ways like that was really cool for our family. And so I ended up having my breast surgery in June. I was supposed to have it in March of 2020, but COVID, that girl. So she happened, and my surgery got pushed off until June. I went in for my surgery in June, and there was like maybe 2.5 pounds of scar tissue that they removed. It was really cool, because our prayer was that they would go in and that they wouldn't find any disease, but they would see evidence that something was there, but that something had changed. And that was literally our family's prayer. And it was so cool when the surgeon told us that they couldn't find any of the diseased cells. They only found scar tissue. They sent it off to 2 different pathology teams because they were just so confused. So another answered prayer. So since June, I've been recovering from that, and I've virtually been pain-free until about September-ish, where I started to notice I was having similar pain in my breast again, and I started to get a little bit. So I did go back, start seeing my doctors, trying to figure out what's going on. Now, they did warn me before doing this surgery, that based on the amount of pain that I am in when I have this surgery, it will determine the type of pain that I feel afterwards, meaning that I could have lots of phantom pain. This frequently happens with women that have their breasts removed, especially if they have an inflammatory type of breast cancer, or one of the ones that cause pain. It just like if you were to get your leg amputated and it's like in a painful situation, you could have phantom pain. So at this point, I've gone back for mammogram and ultrasound, and they didn't see anything there, which is really great news. But they did still say there is a chance that something could show up on my MRI, which if it does, it means that it's just not at the level yet that it was at last time, which leaves me lots of options to be able to go back in and have another breast surgery, where at that point, I would just remove all of my breast tissue. I would be able to save my nipple, and I would have the opportunity to go back with an implant at that time if I wanted. So I'll have an MRI in a couple. This type of disease is really tricky in the sense that it's idiopathic. So they don't know where it comes from. So if they knew where it was coming from, they could pinpoint that and then fix it. But my body is just doing it for no apparent reason. And the crazy thing about it is that you can cause it to happen more and faster from trauma. So like getting punched in the breast, a kid running into your breast, somebody bumping into your breast, stress, pregnancy, breastfeeding, all of those things could bring this back on for me. So we don't plan on having any more kids because we don't want to have this, be a reoccurrence. But they find with a lot of women that do have the types of surgeries that I have, that they never really go into complete remission unless they have a full mastectomy and have all of their breast tissue removed. So even if that's something that I have to do, I'm not necessarily worried or concerned about it at this point, because we've done the transition of my breast in such a way that I will be able to save my nipple and the skin, and it would. So I'm not currently on any medications now. I do go to physical therapy like twice a week, which is really weird. I didn't know they have physical therapy for the breast, but they do. This little lady just does these little massages on like your lymph system and like around the breast and stuff like that. In case it is scar tissue that's causing the pain, they can try to loosen it up, and I get hooked up to like this electrical thing to like pulsate and I don't know, do some weird stuff. But that is basically why I'm fasting now, just in preparation for this test, and not necessarily to be like, oh my God, you need to heal me, there's something in my breast, fix it. But just fasting always helps me get focused and have a positive mindset and view on whatever my situation is, and still just being thankful still in this, because so many people have it so much worse. This is painful, and it has literally wreaked havoc on our lives for the last year and a half, but God has just been so faithful to us. And so that's my story of my fasting journey thus far. In present day, I'm now 17 days into a 21-day water fast. And I would say the breast pain that I had prior to my water fast was about a solid 5 constantly, with intermittent like sharp level 10 type pains. Like, oh my God, I can't talk right now. Please shut up. Now I'm probably at about a solid 3, and the sharp pains are less frequent. It's not something that like is unbearable to live with, but it is very inconvenient because I am just in like this constant pain. And the more I move around, the more I move my arms, the worse it gets. So hopefully we'll be able to get some answers and figure out what is going on. But thank you so much for listening to my journey. If you have any questions, I would definitely